Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to talk about this. This is the Terramaster D8 Hybrid. This is a 4 hard drive or SSD and 4 M2 NVMe NAS storage system currently live on Kickstarter for about 199 nicker. And although I've already done performance testing, although I've already filmed the review, I've already taken all the photos and done all of that stuff in the background, before I even start working on that review, I wanted to make this video. And that is, who the f*** is this device for? Whenever I look at devices here on the channel, be they NAS, be they DAS, be they SSDs, network routers, you can generally find the through line and figure out who that device is for. Maybe it's a prosumer, maybe it's an editor, maybe it's a business, a B2B, a SOHO, all of those different acronyms that fly around. But this is very hard to pin down. This system rocks out the gate with those 4 hard drive bays on the front, and it's got those 4 M.2 NVMe's inside at Gen 3x1 speed. But despite all of that, rocks on a single USB Type-C 10 gig connection, and it doesn't have RAID functionality across the bulk of the system. More on that later on. So I ask once again, who is the target demographic for this device? And that's the point of this video. I went through all of the comments of the original news video we put out on this device. I went through all of the comments of the D5 review that we made live as a written article and as a video, plug. And lots of you fell into 2 camps. Number 1, you were, great, I can use that for X, Y, Z. And the other half of the camp was, what the hell is that thing? And that's what today's video is. I want to tell you the 3 kinds of user who this device is for. But I'm also going to tell you the 3 kinds of user this device isn't for. And hopefully you are in one of those 6 categories. And if you're not, tell me which one you're in so I can maybe add it to another one. Or maybe in the review. So let's crack on with the first kind of user who are going to see the benefits of this thing. Consistent, sustained performance. Very, very important. And I think in this world of Gen 4, Gen 5 M2 NVMe's, it's something that gets overlooked a lot. It's like the main difference between acceleration and top speed. It's like the difference between playing a computer game on fidelity mode or performance mode. It is the difference between peak performance and good sustained performance. This device, although that USB port there on the back can only give you 1 gigs per second or about 1000 megabytes per second, the internal hardware inside this device, particularly if you had 4 drives and an external RAID controller, or even 1 or 2 of those M.2 NVMe's RAIDed together, they've got the potential to massively oversaturate that USB connection. So why would anyone, look at that and go, I don't need that kind of performance. I've got SSDs inside this. Give me 1000 megs each. I can hit all those big high numbers. I want the big high numbers. There are users out there that understand that top performance is irregular. That top performance is constantly up and down. And what they want is a sustained number. Having a device like this with those M.2 NVMe's on that 1000 megabytes per second, and each of those M.2 NVMe's limited to 3x1, RAID or otherwise, is going to give very good sustainable performance compared with spiky up and down performance as the cache on a drive gets oversaturated because you can't really limit it without going into some serious BIOS level stuff, or that your read and write activity on this drive is already going to be capped anyway. So why have the drive trying to peak up and peak down unnecessarily? Having sustained high performance can be a great deal more predictable, but moreover can be a lot more reliable for a lot of users that have got pre-designated operations running on this system where they need to have that moderate level of sustained performance, not peak, sustained, reliable, trusted performance. We've got to talk about it, the lack of RAID on this device. Now that lack of RAID I mentioned almost but not completely, and that is because the first 2 bays in the starter bays there, that supports a RAID 0 or RAID 1. There's a little switch there on the rear, and that little switch, you flick that around to JBOD, just a bunch of drives, RAID 1, which mirrors the drives, or RAID 0, which allows you to have one big bulk storage area there. So a lot of users, one of the earliest complaints I heard in the comments was, this device it doesn't have RAID. What's the point? There's no failover, there's no protection, there's no redundancy, there's no point. I would argue, and by the way, I mean the people in the comments that said this, I would argue that there is a contingent body of users who what they want is smaller pockets of storage connected via a single interface. This device will allow a user utilising those first two bays there to create a nice RAID 1 or RAID 0 storage area with a couple of storage hard drives. They could have two SATA SSDs stored in the other two bays here for two nice little pocket SATA 500 megs performance, and they've got the four M2 NVMe's to have either individual M2 NVMe storage pocket pools if they wish for different storage utilisations, or they could use a connected storage, connected host device, and that would then manage the RAID. What they're being given is a bunch of drives all being presented in the storage manager via that single USB interface, which allows the OS, your Windows, your Mac, your whatever, to start creating different storage pools. Having a lot of individual drives for some users is far preferable to giving them a system that's got a bunch of rando drives knocking around there and relying on an SoC or an ROC component internally to manage the RAID. And we're back to the NAS users. Welcome back. I knew I wouldn't forget you. There are users out there, and I was really surprised by this personally, that there are lots of users when they're looking at expanding their NAS system, they accept that a lot of these NAS devices over here have official NAS expansion devices connected over USB, but those NAS expansions are generally JBOD anyway. Very few, with the exception of, say, QNAP, have hardware RAID external NAS expansions, and this is no exception to that rule. This arrives thanks to its JBOD architecture and USB connectivity. It can expand an existing Terramaster setup, but it also can be connected to other NAS systems. And because of its JBOD architecture there, allows you to start building those individual RAIDs like we mentioned in the previous point. Why is that important? Well, because there are definitely users out there that don't just want to expand the storage afforded to their NAS system, and not just that, but also connect a NAS system where they can back up, back and forth, or synchronize. But more interestingly, they want hybrid tiered connected storage. They want to have their primary NAS, maybe they've got a little cheeky 2 or 4 bay or even an 8 bay. They've got it set up and they want to bolt on expansions. But given that the majority of expansions in the market are all SATA hard drive based, it really limits the number of options afforded to you. This defies that. It allows you to connect this single device via that single port, and then from there attach all of those drives via the single outlet, and then the NAS can then go, right, I want 3 of those drives in a RAID 5. I want 2 of these drives in a RAID 0. I want 2 of those NVMe's to be my hot editing drives or my scratch disk or my cache disk. It allows a user to attach all of these extra storage bays onto the NAS system for a far more tailored expansion experience. But as mentioned, it's not for everyone. Who are the 3 users this device is just not going to do it for? That's just the way it is. We talked about it earlier, let's talk about it again. Peak performance on this is not going to blow anyone away, despite the fact you've got those M2 NVMe's that can crack out 1,000 megs each, and even if you're using a hardware RAID controller on your client device, your NAS, your PC, Mac, whatever, you're going to be limited to that 1 gig USB connection. But moreover from that, the hardware architecture in this system is designed to be very, very lean. That is good in terms of power consumption, and certainly the noise and the overall footprint in your environment is going to be very, very small, but there is no denying that the combination of Realtek and AS Media component chips inside that we went into a lot of detail on the D5 review, these do not allow for peak performance. And when we did connect to this over USB, it wasn't until we were using individual into NVMe's in RAID outside of the device, or using SATA SSDs inside these devices RAIDed together, that we are able to fully saturate that USB connection. These are very lean components inside. So even with the internal M2 NVMe's inside, fully saturating that USB does not feel as easy or as straightforward as you would expect. So peak performance users, you may not be happy with this. That's just the way it is. As post-production of high dense 4K and even 8K media becomes, I'm not going to say commonplace, but I am going to say more accepted in current production format, I will say this device, although you could probably, edit 4K comfortably on a USB 3.2 Gen 2 10 gig connection, I'm not going to say that that is a fantastic way to edit. A lot of users that are moving over to M.2 NVMe's to edit storage on their Mac or Windows system and then moving away from local storage onto connected storage, they generally look at things like USB 4 and Thunderbolt connectivity. These give you the thousands or thousands of megabytes per second for that editing of more denser media. But that 1000 megs external connection means that although you're going to get, again, that nice sustained performance that we mentioned at the beginning, it does also mean that this device, when it comes to denser media, is just simply not going to chug out the performance you need because of that bottleneck there of that USB there on the rear. So just keep that in mind. If you are editing particularly dense, raw media, it may be worth looking at something with a little bit more bandwidth on the back to play with.
That's just the way it is.
And those looking for failover, those looking for RAID performance boosts, this just isn't going to do it for you. I mentioned earlier on about the lack of internal RAID on this, classically known as hardware RAID or a RAID on chip, an ROC and SOC inside. This system, with the exclusion of those two hard drive bays there on the front supporting our RAID 0, RAID 1, this system is heavily reliant on RAID management by an external system there. So again, whether it is your Mac, Windows, your NAS, your whatever, you're going to have to use a little bit more resources of your core system to manage that storage area. Once you connect it, your storage manager on your Mac or Windows, all the drives are going to appear in your storage manager to do with what you will. But just keep that in mind, that this system does not have an internal native RAID management, which a lot of users still favour because of the performance benefits it can give, as well as leveraging away any overheads on your operating system when it comes to performance, because it's all managed internally. If you look online and you look for USB 3.2 Gen 2 RAID 5 ready enclosures with more than 2 bays, it's super rare. There are barely any in the market. There aren't a lot of controllers for it. For some reason, when you reach 4 or 5 bays, the majority of manufacturers immediately move over to JBOD devices that rely on the OS to manage the RAID there, and this is no exception to that rule. There are a few out there, but just not many, so I understand why Terramaster didn't go for it. And again, at that price point of 199 nicker, what do you want, jam on it? That's fantastic pricing for a 4 hard drive, 4 NVMe system there. But do not expect the failover and the safety net that you would get from a system that has internal hardware RAID. And there is a reason you generally find you have to spend not even just like 20% extra, in some cases 50% more to get the likes of, say, QNAP's hardware RAID 4-bay, getting the likes of OWC's or Highpoint's 4 or 5-bay RAID-enabled expansion there with USB. You have to pay substantially more, but there is a reason for that. Ultimately, at $199, it's very hard to fault this. I'm not a massive fan of the fact that Terramaster went Kickstarter for this. The idea of established brands using crowdfunding, I'm still not completely in love with, but I will say that that doesn't mean this is a bad product. I think for what it's trying to do, it is a good product there. But just keep that in mind that there are some users that are going to love it and some users that don't realise that they will not, because it's not best suited to doing their needs. And I hope this video helped. As I say, I'm going to be doing a deep hardware review on this. It's going to come soon. But as the crowdfunding had just started, I wanted to make this clear to users whether it is or is not in their wheelhouse, rather than wait for that review to be finished and then you may have already backed the campaign and not realise it's for you, or vice versa. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. There should be a link to the written review soon in the description and a link to the crowdfunding as well if you want to check that out. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time.